I hate this thing. I really do. I do. I can't help it. Forget it. All right, folks. Welcome to Glove Fist with Frank Lotierzo and Jack Hirsch coming at you live, covering all the great boxing stories. Take it away, guys.
Welcome to Glove Fist. My name is Frank Lotierzo, former fighter, part-time writer, try to be a full-time observer, joined by former six-term president, BWAA Writers Association president, Mr. Jack Hirsch, who always has a big smile on his face, getting ready to kick my butt, take over the show. Jack, how are you tonight?
Well, I'll have a little beef with you. We'll get to it in a little while, Frank. I mean, I'm not going to start off with it. You know, we want to start off positive before we go at it.
I can start off positive.
Gloves. This is a segment of the show where we touch gloves.
Right. We get along here. I'm in a good mood, Jack, because God is smiling on me because for the third time in a row, a Philadelphia team went far in the playoffs, and it looked as if, you know, if the Sixers beat the Celtics, I like them to beat the Heat, and they either got to play Denver or LA, and I think they're in it against either one of those teams. They could have had a parade in Philly, but thank the Lord that, like the Super Bowl, the NBA Finals are a no-fly zone for Philadelphia teams. I'm sorry, Mr. Bergman. I love you. I know you're out there cursing me, but what can I tell you? I guess you got the Phillies and the Eagles to look forward to. Other than that, Jack, this weekend was quiet. A lot of boxing. There was a big controversy. I'm sure we're going to touch on that. We're going to preview the Haney-Lomachenko fight. Joe Lewis's birthday was last week. I think we should talk about him. Today, I'll tell you what, Jack, I'll give you $1 if you guess who turned 78 today. Who would have turned 78 today?
It is May 15th. I don't know, Frank. You got me.
You liked him a lot, and you saw him fight live, and I liked him a lot too.
Not Jimmy Ellis. His birthday already passed.
That's about as close as you can get. Now, not Jimmy Ellis then.
Not Ernie Terrell.
I'll give you one more hint. He fought Jimmy Ellis.
Oh, not Ernie Chavis, is it?
Jerry Quarry.
Jerry Quarry. Okay.
May 15th, 1945. You know, Jack, you recall this. When Ali was exiled, Quarry was voted for 3 straight years. Right?
Yeah.
The best, the most popular boxer.
Yeah, Jerry Quarry never would have beaten Ali and Frazier, you know. They could have fought each guy 25, 30 times. He wasn't going to
But he was so, Jack, why do you think he was so well liked and had such a strong fan base?
Because, well, for one, he was charismatic and he could beat the rest. He just couldn't beat the great fighters, couldn't get over the top. He scored some really good wins when you look at it. Beat Floyd Patterson. It was a little, the first fight was a draw. Second fight he beat him. It was a little controversial, but you could accept the decision. It certainly wasn't blatant by any means. He beat Thad Spencer in the tournament at a time when some people were saying Spencer was the best.
Spencer was favored to win that tournament.
Of Ali. And he scored these big wins. Mac Foster, 24 fights, 24 KOs. He burst his bubble in that fight. Ron Lyle, unbeaten, coming to the Garden, big puncher.
Underdog in that fight also.
Right. And then the Ernie Shavers, the one-round blitz of Ernie Shavers. Jack Bodell, respected British.
First round knockout.
Out in one round. Yeah, the one opportunity that got away from him was in the WBA heavyweight tournament. He lost the close decision to Jimmy Ellis, legitimately. But as it turned out, Quarry had a bad back. Ellis was the type of fighter, Frank. If Quarry fought Ellis 10 times, it would go 5 wins apiece, something like that.
I think so. Their careers are pretty similar.
Yeah. George Chuvalo, he's winning that fight. He seems to be headed to victory. Chuvalo's eyes closed in the 7th round. Chuvalo lands a long left hook. Quarry goes down and loses track, gets up, takes a knee, planning to take a 9 count, loses track of the count, had a lapse of concentration, and it cost them. I mean, he could fight Chuvalo 30 times, and Chuvalo wasn't ever going to knock him down. That was a bit of an aberration, even though it was a legitimate knockdown.
Yeah, Quarry was one of those guys. Every time you thought he was on the verge, he'd throw in his stinker. And like you said, Jack, he could never beat Frazier or Ali. Just the bad timing of the birth certificate. His real shot was against Ellis, and he had to hurt back. Angelo Dundee gave Ellis a great game plan, and that was about it. But Quarry was a top 5 contender for like 8 years.
Oh yeah, oh absolutely. His one big shot that he may have had a chance, Frank, was on October 26, 1970 against Ali, only because Ali trained for a limited amount of time on his comeback, was rushed in, put in like 6 weeks of training. And even Quarry told me later on he wouldn't have had a prayer against Ali at Ali's peak.
Of the 60s.
No chance at all, beating any version of Ali. But he said that one time he was in the best shape of his career, and Ali wasn't in that good a shape. He felt he could have pressed him. He really felt he had a legitimate chance of winning on that one night only against Ali. And you can't argue. What would have happened, Frank, if Quarry didn't get cut and kept coming at Ali? I still think Ali finds a way to win, but that was an Ali that was rusty, not in top shape. So you never know.
Jack, I think a lot of that is revisionist, because I'm going to tell you the truth. Ali only had 6 weeks to train, but I just think from the 2 fights they had, the 7 rounds they fought, I don't think Quarry won 1 round, and the style matchup was so heavily in Ali's favor because Ali's best punch was Quarry's biggest deficiency, and that was the left jab. And then when you take into account that Quarry could punch, but he wasn't a life taker, and it wasn't like he could ever turn the fight or hurt Ali enough with one shot to freeze him where he could go in and then maybe really beat him up and maybe finish him. So I think a lot of that is revision history. But I mean, look, getting Ali off a 43-month layoff, you'd have to think if he was ever going to beat him, it would have been that fight. But remember, Ali looked pretty good in that fight.
I will say this. If Quarry at his best fought Ken Norton at his best and they fought a few times, Quarry would have won one of the fights, I believe.
I think if we take the best Quarry against the best Norton, I think Quarry would have taken Norton 2 out of 3. I think the Quarry that lost to Frazier in 69 beats any version of Norton.
I wouldn't go that far, but I do feel that's the one fight. If they fought a few times, it wouldn't be a shutout.
All right, Jack. Now, speaking of Quarry, he was involved in a controversial fight, and that was against George Chuvalo when Zach Clayton counted him out. Quarry got confused with the count.
Frank, I hate to cut in. Legitimately, Zach Clayton was a controversial referee, and our buddy Russell Peltz is not a Zach Clayton fan at all. He can't stand Zach Clayton, and everything, as he wrote, it seemed to write in his book, $30 in the Cut Eye. Great book. But that fell on Quarry himself, losing track of the count, not getting up. I'm not going to blame Zach Clayton for that one.
I don't know if I could have stopped that if I was the referee, Jack, because Quarry was fine. That count was a little bit quick, I felt. But look, the bottom line is people left that fight frustrated. They didn't think it was a total legit knockout. Maybe technically it was, but people still debate it today. That's all I'm saying. Go ahead.
That was the second professional boxing show I was ever at. December 12th, 1969.
Yep.
And I don't recall any controversy with the referee. The only controversy was, what was Quarry thinking? The moment the ref waved his hands 10, he got up and he was like beside himself.
But Jack, the show he wasn't hurt though, because he jumped right up after he was knocked down, and then he took the 8 count and he got confused. But I remember watching it on TV. Now in 69, I was 10. And I remember feeling that like, oh man, they shouldn't have stopped that fight. But this weekend we saw a fight where Rolly Romero was involved and he got a gift shot at the title for a vacant title, and he fought Barrasso, and he was losing the fight. All three of the judges had him down, and Tony Weeks, not only did he stop the fight on punches that missed Barrasso, but he also ruled a knockdown where it was a clear push. I mean, we get on the refs all the time. I'm not going to start talking crooked, on the take, or inept, but I'll just say this much. That's one of the worst stoppages I've ever seen, and Tony Weeks had a really bad night.
Yeah, Tony Weeks is a good referee. It was a bad stoppage. But let me say this about the knockdown. I thought the knockdown was legitimate. I thought the punch landed cleanly, and Barrasso
It reminded me of the Hagler knockdown against Roldan, where he was totally pushed.
Now the scoring had Romero down 1, 3, and 5 points. But let's say hypothetically the 9th round had run its course. Weeks didn't stop it. That would have been a 2-point swing for Romero, meaning he would have been up 1 point on one card and down 1 point on the other card and down 3 points on the third card. So it kind of reminds you a little of the scoring Joe Louis against Billy Conn in the first fight. Everyone says, well, all Conn had to do was finish on his feet, and he had the decision won.
Easier said than done against Joe Louis.
He still had to win another round,
right,
Conn, in that fight. You know, if Louis swept the last 3 rounds, he actually would have pulled the fight out on points if it got that far. I don't take this world title thing seriously.
No,
Romero,
that was a fugazi.
It's for belt, and it gets Romero attention. And he's this era's coming of Adrian Broner, who, if we have time, could talk a little about later on. Certain of these personalities, he talks, he's loud, he's boisterous. He did give Tank Davis a good fight, though. You got to give him he got stopped in the 7th round. But for the first 6 rounds, there was very little difference between him and Tank. But admittedly, Tank was biting.
He was up by 1 point on one card. He was down on the other 2 by a point and by 3.
Right, but the point is, there was very little difference between him and Tank. But with that said, that's the way Tank operates. Tank is like a marathon runner. He doesn't care if you're a little ahead of him at the halfway point, because he's drawing you down late on, which he took Romero out.
But Jack, I thought Romero looked a little gun shy and tentative for some of that fight
against
Ismael Barrasso. Yeah, I do.
Yeah, Barrasso was a late sub too. That's the thing about it. Also,
and he's 40 years old.
But back to Tony Weeks. This is what bothers me, Frank. People are saying, "Oh, the fight was fixed." Tony Weeks.
I'm not going there.
Tony Weeks has been around a long time. Consider this too. And I think it's way too early to stoppage. Don't get me wrong. So I'm not condoning Tony Weeks' decision, but keep this in mind. If you're the referee of a fight in which one of the fighters suffered a fatality, like Tony Weeks with a Levander Johnson back in 2005, I think
I knew Levander Johnson.
So you could comment on that, but I think it stays with a ref. And Barrasso, for a moment, it looked like his body language wasn't that good, but not in the way that the fight should have been stopped. He was kind of like faltering back. He didn't seem to show the pep, but he wasn't getting hit. He wasn't in trouble.
All the punches missed, Jack. I've watched it countless times.
Yeah,
he just got caught up in the excitement, I guess.
How about we settle on this? It was way too early a stoppage. Way too early. Poor stoppage on the part of Tony Weeks. But referees are normal. They have off nights. Sometimes they make a snap decision, maybe panicked or whatever. He stopped the fight. I don't think there's any ulterior motive. Just a bad call.
No, I agree with Jack. Simple. Jack, I agree with that. Here's my only issue with that. In boxing, that split-second decision can cost a fighter so much. And if you take Barrasso, he's 40 years old. That might have been his only shot. Now, maybe he's going to get a rematch off the controversy, but it's not like when the referee blows a call on the Rams Saints NFC Championship game. Guys' careers aren't quite affected like that as far as their income, their health and whatever. And it's just like, Jack, he just missed by so much. I mean, I could see if one of the punches hit, but I mean, it was clear. I mean, everybody that watched that in the moment was outraged. And I think Barrasso was so shocked because I've seen guys say, well, why didn't he protest? I think he was in utter disbelief and he couldn't believe it. But his corner went crazy when it happened.
Barrasso
so, yeah, a bad night for Weeks. But it's just like it really does hurt the fighter.
It showed that he objected, and kind of like when they played it in slow motion, they showed his reaction like, what? What
right.
did he do? Sometimes these things are kind of blessing in disguise. This might actually help Barroso. Let's say he really was fading. And Romero, as I said, that was going to be a 2-point swing, meaning if the 9th round was completed, and Romero won 2 of the last 3 rounds, he'd get no worse than a draw. If he won 2 of the last 3 rounds, Barroso had his work cut out for him. He needed to win 2 of the last.
But Jack, to me, that doesn't matter because we have no idea what happens after that. That's sort of like, Jack, that's like the Klitschko-Lewis fight where everybody says, when they stop the fight, well, who was more tired, Klitschko or Lewis? It doesn't matter. We don't know how it would have panned out had it gone into a 7th round. All we know is this. Klitschko did not come to the ring injured or with a busted up eye. That happened during the fight, and Lewis did that. So he won the fight. But for like a lot of Klitschko fans, they go on and say, well, Lewis was getting tired, and if that fight goes 6 or another couple rounds, then he loses. You can't say that. All we know is this. Fighters get cut, they get hurt, and the fights are stopped. We can't go what if on that.
Sometimes it's a blessing in disguise to the guy on the short end of the referee's decision. A case in point would be George Groves and Carl Frack. Their first fight also stopped in the 9th round.
Yep.
A lot of people were furious. They felt the fight was stopped in Frack's favor much too fast. So as a result, they had a big rematch.
And Frack destroyed him.
Wembley, like 80,000 people or so in the stands, a mega event. They each got a good payday. What happens if the ref doesn't stop the fight? Maybe Barroso gets stopped by Romero. Maybe
you don't know.
Romero did look a little bit fresher the 2, in all fairness, even though it was a premature stoppage. And
he wasn't doing as much fighting as the other guy, but yeah.
So I normally agree with Joe Bergman, not this one. Can't referees like boxers get old overnight? They can kind of lose their edge, referees. I'll admit that, who've been around a while. But that has investigation written all over it. I don't think there was any impropriety on Tony.
But Jack, doesn't it bother you? It bothers me that referees never answer questions after fights. They don't talk. And are they ever reviewed? Are the judges and the refs ever reviewed? It seems that like nothing ever happens and we just go on to the next fight. There's no review. They don't talk to the press. That bothers me. They should be held accountable for their actions.
Well, let me ask you this, Frank. You like to open up the show, have a little fun talking about giving a dig to the Philadelphia teams. After an NBA playoff game, the officials aren't sitting there at a press conference answering questions. After an NFL game, the officials aren't sitting there. The umpires aren't sitting there. The league reviews things and then comes up with a statement saying they made a mistake. That's what normally happens. And maybe in boxing, they don't do that, commissions. They don't say referees made a mistake, but they don't have the ref talk to the media, but they don't do it in the major sports.
I don't like that in any sport. I think the referee should have to justify why they made the decision that they did. Our friend Randy Gordon always talks about that when refs render a bad verdict, that they should be sat down and explained. This is why I gave this round to that fighter, and this is why I gave it to this guy, and this is what I was thinking. I don't see how the transparency is bad in a sport that has no transparency.
I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying if we're going to criticize the sport of boxing, for not making referees and judges available. And that's a fair criticism, Frank, of you. I actually agree with you. I just want to point out they don't do it in the other sports either.
Okay. Let me say hi to Little Holmes. I'm not sure who that is. I think I know who it is. He has a lot to say. Part of being hurt. Hagler was cuffed down. Yes, most people think that. Although I don't think that was outrageous because he was throwing a punch as he knocked him down. What else do we have? All right, Jack. So we agree. Tony Weeks had a bad night, and Romero.
Bad decision. I won't call it a bad night. A bad decision to stop the fight.
Well, to me, the only thing he's remembered for that night is that decision. So I think it's a bad night. But I'm not going to go to the mat with you on that.
Okay. I give it to you on that one.
I don't think that Romero is a player at 140.
Frank, what's the matter with us with Vasily Lomachenko and Devin Haney?
We're going to get to that. Okay.
Why the heck are we talking about Raleigh Romero?
Because after Devin Haney beats Lomachenko, he may be fighting Romero if he moves up to 140.
Well, Devin Haney's with Top Rank. Romero right now is with the PBC.
PBC, right.
And Romero wants to fight Ryan Garcia. Ryan Garcia has nowhere else to go. I guess he's with Golden Boy. I could see them doing business.
Ryan Garcia, that'd be a great fight for Ryan Garcia. He would stretch Romero.
Ryan Garcia is so erratic mentally, and Romero.
I think he'd be a tiger against Romero.
Yeah, I would think
After seeing that last fight, I think so.
But keep this in mind, Romero arguably did better against Tank than Garcia. Arguably. Oh, keep that in mind.
You could make that case. I don't have a problem with that. I don't. Okay, so what are you saying there, Little Holmes? Cuffs him around the head by almost pulling him down.
Tell me why, Frank, you're getting that urge to pick Lomachenko to beat Devin Haney. I could tell you're getting that itch. You think Loma has maybe one big fight in him or isn't past his peak the way people think. You're getting that urge. You're not counting.
All right, I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you why.
Not.
I'm going to tell you why. Excluding Lomachenko, I have Haney behind Shakur and Tank. And Lomachenko, Jack, is a real fighter. And he doesn't come into many fights as the underdog, or he hasn't, as he is in this fight. This would be his signature win. This would be huge to beat Haney in his prime when they've had bad blood for 3 or 4 years. Lomachenko has been, he was the man for a while, loses to Lopez, and everybody, I think, wrote him off a little too quick. He's had injury problems. I just think I can't count him out for 2 reasons. He's a real fighter, and I'm still not sure, even though Haney gained my respect by going to Australia and beating Cambosa twice, I'm not sure how good he is. I give him credit for that. But I know Lomachenko is going to bring his A game. And here's the other thing that I think will factor in. And a friend of mine on my post said it today. And I had been thinking this. And when he said it, I thought, there might be something to it. Haney's not a big puncher. Lomachenko was froze for about 7 or 8 rounds because of Lopez's power, and he didn't go near him until he slowed down a little bit. That's not going to be the case with Haney. The only thing that scares me is if Haney is really focused and stays to his plan, he has 2 things going for him big. Size, the jab, which can nullify everything. And, Jack, I really haven't been impressed with Lomachenko since he stopped Jorge Linares. But I have to admit, yes, I'm going to take Haney, but it's not a real strong lean. I will not be surprised if we're sitting here next week talking about a Lomachenko upset. And that might be more because I'm still not sure about Haney.
I don't give Loma a good shot. I think he's a great fighter. I mean, if Loma was in his prime, I don't know what direction I would go. And I hate to be asked questions Like when I tell people I'm picking Devin Haney to win big on points, win 10, 11 of the 12 rounds. I mean, a really dominant performance. I pick him to win going away.
Right.
But then I might be asked, well, what happens if Lomachenko shows up in peak form at his very best? And I don't want to answer that question because my mindset might be different. Loma's the much smaller guy. Remember when Loma beat Guillermo Rigondeaux? Even Loma said, don't give me much credit for that. He's a much smaller guy.
Exactly. And I gained a lot of respect for Lomachenko saying that.
Lomachenko didn't want the credit. That was like, wow. He was dismissive of his own victory. You know, he just felt he met.
Jack, that's what I'm saying. He's a real fighter.
He's a real.
He doesn't lie to himself. He's not a con man. I mean, he didn't accept the Lopez defeat well. But look, no fighter accepts defeat well. I can get with that. And he had the injury to fall back on. But Lomachenko is a real fighter. We never have trouble with him making fights. He's willing to fight everybody. But Jack, this time, look, what are the two things that are huge in the outcome of a fight? Size and age. And he's on the losing side of both. And now we find out
he's 24. Okay, right,
Jack.
there. And there's a thought. I have a bit of a thought here, school of thought, that Haney might be a generational fighter. Years from now, we might be talking about Haney the way we, talk about a Pernell Whitaker. Okay.
Oh, Jack, I need to see a lot more before I go there.
An awful lot more. An awful lot more we need to see. But he's got to start somewhere, Haney. And
this is his signature fight too.
He started by going to Australia, showing all the guts in the world. If I was Haney's manager, I wouldn't have said,
Jack, but we talked about it then. He bet on himself. I love guys that do that.
Can you see Mayweather deciding he'd go to Australia to shut anyone down twice? I mean, Haney's showing it, the intestinal fortitude that
Mayweather never left the MGM, Pat, Jack, once he became big time. Here's the other thing that we haven't discussed yet, but this is huge. The weigh-in for the fight is 36 hours before the fight. That tells me that Haney could be a junior middleweight when they get in the ring. Well, 36 hours. So the weigh-in is 9:30 Friday morning for a fight that's going to start midnight Saturday night.
And what you said could be revealing. You kind of wonder with tactics, okay? Maybe Haney is thinking he wants a spectacular win. He wants to knock Lomachenko out. Outpointing him the way he did Kambosos might not be good enough for him. And being a much bigger man, maybe he stands in the middle of the ring. He unloads more. He boxes less. Loma with his herky-jerky side to side could score, go in and out, and throw Haney's rhythm off, because Lomachenko is the best rhythm fighter in all of boxing. Just give
and he has the best footwork of any fighter alive.
Back, forth, just finding them. So maybe Haney's tactics would be off. I'm trying to build a case for Lomachenko. The best case I could build for Lomachenko is this, that he's in his prime, let's pretend right now, against Lopez. It was a little bit of an aberration because, as you said, he was leery of Lopez's power half the fight and didn't get started until he had to. And once he got started, he had success, for the most part in the second half.
Once he started making Lopez go back, yes.
Once he started to. So let's say Lomachenko really hasn't lost anything. His last fight against Jermaine Ortiz was a question of just rust. It wasn't his best night. That could happen to any fighter. And the best of Lomachenko shows up, then all bets are off as far as Devin Haney goes, because who knows what's going to happen in that case. But I got to believe, I've seen a decline in Loma over the years. I've seen a subtle decline.
I agree. The last time he looked supreme was against Linares, and I think maybe there's a chance that fight took out of him. But you know something, Jack? I have found when you discuss certain things, like, how corporations sometimes they'll have a skull session and they'll put everybody in a conference room and they'll throw ideas at each other, and then something somebody says will click. You just did that to me. You made me think about something about how Loma, the herky-jerky, in and out, that made me think, Jack, Lomachenko has to win this fight on the inside. He has to get past the jab, and he has to get inside. However, with Haney having all this time to rehydrate and gain weight, what's the worst thing you can do? Walk into a big guy. Take it to a guy that's bigger and stronger than you. And that right there could be a huge factor, because two things happen there. Lomachenko's punches don't move or bother Haney as much. And Haney, especially if he walks into that jab, and let's say Haney has an excellent jab, that could bust up Lomachenko. And if he rocks him enough with that jab on the way in, and Lomachenko gets the least bit tentative, now all bets are off, because now everything is going Haney's way. Where Lomachenko, Jack, has to get inside, has to dictate the pace, and has to force exchanges on the inside where he has the advantage. But there's a price to pay for that. And if Haney's that much bigger, then it multiplies.
I think Lomachenko's key to victory, if he's to win this fight, is to turn it into the fastest paced fight imaginable.
And not get behind early.
Well, exactly. Don't get in a hole. Lomachenko can fight at virtual top speed for 12 rounds. He's in that type of condition, it seems, all the time. Haney comes in the ring in excellent shape himself. There are no stamina problems. But if Haney is missing Loma with the jab, he might try to sit down on his punches, spend more time in the ring center, and that's Lomachenko's best chance to beat Haney from ring center. I don't think Loma could chase Haney and beat him. I think Haney would outbox him if he moved, and Haney would beat him using various tactics. But if they're locked at ring center with Loma's style in and out, left to right, all type of angles, you don't know. He could win rounds that way.
I think to do that, Jack, he has to get inside. I think he has to get inside. I really do. I think he has to get.
Loma's not a puncher, Frank, though. He's not.
But Jack, he can put them together inside, and then he can get away. Haney, if Haney is missing with a jab, here's what will happen. If you're missing, when guys miss with their jab, they don't throw their right hand because they don't want to get countered. And then what happens? If they're missing with their jab, sometimes they don't use it as much. And if Loma could make Haney a little tentative to jab, that means there will be less of them, and he will open the path, and there will be more of a bridge for him to get inside, because now he can fill the hole instead of Haney filling the hole with the jab. So the jab is going to be the key. How effective is Haney? Is he dictating the fight? Is he keeping Loma from being able to get inside? Or is he missing a little bit? Loma making him miss and countering him, making him pay. And then that makes Haney a little tentative. And that's when Loma can really become aggressive. But the mountain is on Loma to solve the style.
Think of the two fighters mentally, Frank, also. Loma might actually have the edge here. Loma's had such a long and glorious amateur career. Fighting's like second nature to him. You could wake him up in the middle of the night and he'll go a couple of rounds all of a sudden in the gym. It's like he's in his own like we sit in our living room watching TV. That's how Loma feels in the ring. Totally.
And Jack, here's the other thing too that works for Lomachenko. When is the last time he fought or he came into the ring as a somewhat pronounced underdog?
He's a 3-1 underdog.
That's a big underdog.
That's a big underdog. But what happens, Frank, if during the fight Haney becomes frustrated? It's the 8th, 9th round. Loma's not slowing down, and Haney's not sure whether he's ahead on points or not.
Jack, I think anything that creates chaos favors Lomachenko.
I think Loma
because he's been there.
I think Loma even if he's down 5-2, it's going to be tough mentally. He's not going to falter mentally. The only way Loma would falter mentally if it's a beatdown. By the end of the fight, this guy's beating the heck out of me, and I'm so far down on points. That would be the only way. It would have to be a complete beatdown.
And if Lomachenko can keep it close, that puts pressure on Haney not to make a mistake. What did Bill Parcells used to say? Extend the game. Make them, put the pressure on them, make them make a mistake. The closer that fight is down the stretch, the more pressure is on Haney. And if he all of a sudden has to start fighting as the puncher and pushing it, I mean, there's another that could work for Lomachenko.
Now, if you're going to laugh too in a moment. You and I are talking. When we're talking, this is October 21st, 1951, and you and I are making an argument why the Brown Bomber,
Marciano and Lewis.
Marciano. And you say, well, the Brown Bomber is on a winning streak. He's got a jab. If he keeps Rocky at the end of it, this and that.
But Jack, Lewis was much more shot than
Lewis was
Lomachenko is.
Lewis was.
I know, but he was shot. It's hard for me to go back and picture the terms then, because obviously I wasn't born. But I was looking at the fight. Lewis was shot, and Haney is no Marciano.
And Lewis was actually, he was after 5 rounds. I think it was even, or he wasn't losing. He may have been up 3-2 on.
After 5 rounds, I think he was up 3-2.
3-2. So it wasn't the blowout, but. Regardless, but I'm picking.
Lewis had nothing but a jab in that fight, Jack.
We're both picking Haney by decision, but I'm picking Haney widely, like 10-2. That,
you think he dominates?
Dominates. A dominating decision by Haney. If Loma loses a close decision, 7-5, there's a little controversy. Majority decision. To me, it's a tremendous boost for Loma's greatness, because at this advanced stage, if he could hold a much bigger guy and a talent like Devin Haney close, it would say an awful lot.
I'm seeing Haney win a decision, not a runaway. I see Lomachenko's face marked up and busted up, but Haney wins, and I don't think there's controversy, and I don't see either guy knocking the other guy out. But I have to admit, if I see a stoppage, it would probably be in Haney's favor, because Lomachenko got down, he had to force the fight, and he ran into one.
Let me ask you this, Frank. If there's a house fight in this fight that the judges would lean towards a little bit, and I'm not saying the judges are dishonest, but let's be honest.
We know that they know what the fight, what it means.
They're usually always going to lean towards them for whatever reason. Okay, let's put it that way. Certain fighters, for whatever reason, would the lean go towards Haney or Lomachenko in this fight? I'm not sure.
I think it goes towards Haney because he's young, he's undefeated, and they need that to build the bigger fights. Where I think Lomachenko, I think they probably figure, if he loses, he retires, or if he loses close, he continues to fight, and then he can they won't have trouble forcing him or getting him to fight other big names. I could see Lomachenko, if he lost a close fight, would go right at somebody, a big name after that. So I think the scoring, I think the toss-up rounds, the swing rounds, Haney will probably get, because I think it's better for business if Haney wins. I mean, could we, if let's say Lomachenko was fighting Shakur Stevenson or Tank Saturday night, I would give him much less of a chance.
If Loma wins, okay, Top Rank could easily match him with Shakur Stevenson, because they promote both. So that's
exactly.
A fight, yeah.
But I give him less of a chance against Stevenson or Tank than I do Haney. I wouldn't be surprised if there's an upset here. I could never pick him to beat Davis or Shakur Stevenson.
Now, their rematch clause, they're not talking about it now. Lately we don't know whether there's a rematch clause.
Jack, I don't know that. We didn't find out about the hydration clause until this week. Russell,
Right.
I saw Russell post where it was in the fine print at the bottom that they never looked at. And Jack, before we leave that, let's let everybody understand this. That's huge. That is huge. That hydration clause, because if Haney can come in the ring that big, when you have guys under 150 pounds, those 4 or 5 pounds are a lot. Okay. And let's remember this also. Lomachenko, to me, I think is still probably more of a junior lightweight than a lightweight.
Yeah, well, no, Lomachenko can actually go down in weight if he had to, but we'll see.
Dan Workman said,
I like him a little wider than you do. And sentimentally, I'm rooting for Loma. I'll be honest about it. Sentimentally.
Jack, Dan Workman said Loma's the house fighter here. This is Haney's last fight contractually with Top Rank. Dan, thanks for enlightening us on that. I still think that Haney probably gets the benefit of the decision.
That's, even though Daniel makes a good point, that's overplayed. The judges aren't thinking Loma's the house fighter. We're going to score for him because he's with Top Rank. I feel that's pretty irrelevant as far as the judges go. In the case of someone like Canelo, he's a favorite son of the WBC. I know it enters judges' mind. If they score against Canelo, are they going to get work? Could it affect them? They kind of want to make sanctioning bodies happy at times. This Loma-Haney fight, I don't think we're going to get any of that.
I do think the boxing establishment, though, wants it's better if.
Yeah, let's sit off this for 1 second. I've got to correct myself. When you complimented Tim Tszyu a while ago, when Jamel Charlo fell out of the fight, for him to fight Harris in that fight, I didn't give him his due. Tim Tszyu, he's still waiting for Jamel Charlo, that big fight, and he's fighting in the interim. He's fighting Carlos Ocampo on June 18th. What is Jamel Charlo doing? If he was injured, we haven't heard from him since. Is he rehabbing? I mean, what's the problem here? But Tim Tszyu is keeping busy. He's shown he's a real fighter. You weren't giving Tim Tszyu any shot to beat Jamel Charlo, but based on character alone, you got to consider Tim Tszyu's chances, take him a little more seriously, because this is a real fighter who's willing.
I agree with that, Jack.
Guys, in the meantime,
I just think Charlo is just the better fighter, and if they're both in shape and somewhat close to the top of their game, I just think I think Charlo wins a style matchup. I think he's the harder puncher. I think he's more accurate. I think he has a better jab. Now he has a left hook. I think he has meanness to him. I just think he's a better overall better fighter. But if he's not active and Tszyu is, of course that closes the gap. But and I thought Tszyu looked good the last time out, but I still favor Charlo. I think when his career's done, we're going to look at him, and everybody likes to talk about the top 10 junior middleweights of all time. I wouldn't be surprised if Charlo sneaks in there.
It's possible. Oh, there's another fight this weekend that's slipping under the radar, at least here in the United States. A women's fight, I'm not saying there's big interest in, but Katie Taylor, I mean, would you say she's the biggest name in women's boxing, or is it Claressa Shields? Katie Taylor's fighting Chantel Cameron, this weekend. Who's a bigger name, Katie Taylor, Claressa Shields?
I think Shields is. And that's an honest assessment from somebody who is just now starting to watch women's boxing. Okay. But I think Shields is perceived as the better fighter and probably the bigger name.
They're probably never going to meet because Katie Taylor could fight lightweight, junior welterweight. Claressa Shields is too big. I know there could be some talk about them meeting in the middle, that maybe Claressa Shields can come down a couple of weight divisions. Katie Taylor could come up a division or two. But we had something like that with Layla Ali and Christy Martin. Christy Martin was basically at the end of her career. but she gave up a lot of size to a much bigger Layla Ali, and it was a wipeout, that fight. Layla Ali stopping Christie in the 4th round.
You could almost make the case, although it's a much lower level, that Layla was a lot bigger than Christie, as Haney is Lomachenko. Christie's on the way down. Lomachenko's has definitely declined. So I can see that. But yeah, there was never a doubt that Layla Ali was going to win that fight.
We're talking about Rolly Romero before I mentioned Adrian Broner, saying Romero is this era's version of Broner, even though Broner, he fought at his best not that long ago, a few years ago, never officially really retired. But Broner's back. He's fighting June 9th. He signed with Don King. And Don King had a recent picture, a stack of bills, money.
I saw that.
I cracked up seeing it. Good for King at age 91. He's raising a little hell with Adrian Broner. But don't kid yourself. Adrian Broner is a very appealing opponent for a lot of the top guys, because they look at it as easy money. Broner has enough of a name. Imagine
and he does just enough to lose.
But imagine matching Rolly Romero against Adrian Broner, the foul-mouthed talk that would go on. That would be a fun fight. Regis Prograis, who just signed with Matchroom, you put him against Broner. Of course, we both like Prograis to win big, but Broner is a viable name. Who's to say the winner between Josh Taylor and Teofimo Lopez? They would love to fight Broner. I mean, Broner's very, very beatable, but he's marketable still, in situations.
If he could have a decent outing, he could probably extend it. And that's what he's doing. He's just fighting to extend his career for another payday. He's not somebody we take serious.
He's fighting.
Jack, let me ask you this.
Miami.
You just mentioned Josh Taylor. Assuming, and we really can't assume it, but if he beats Teofimo Lopez, I've read some things that he said recently, and it sounds like if he does, he's going to go up to 147. I like Josh Taylor a lot at 140. I don't see him staying on the fast track at 147.
We talk from time to time of real fighters, take chances, they're bold. What can you say about Josh Taylor? He got a decision over Jack Hadrill. Virtually everyone thinks Jack Hadrill won the fight. Okay,
I don't think it was a wipeout, but he won.
No. Right. But the point is the perception. Everyone is
right.
It was considered I didn't consider it a blatant robbery. I just considered it a bad decision, but not blatant crazy.
Andre Ward had it for had it for Taylor too.
Well, Andre Ward's certainly in a minority there. I mean, I could find people who scored for Vander Holyfield over Lennox Lewis in the first fight. You could find them, wherever.
You really, Jack? I don't know anybody that saw it that way, to be honest. Really?
Which one? Lewis Holyfield?
The first fight?
It was a draw, Frank. The judges saw
I know the judges saw that, but that was a 9-3 fight, in my opinion.
Yeah, but the point is, you can always find someone, whatever. But this is the point. Josh Taylor's so bitter, about the whole thing. He had his chance to fight Jack Hadrill constantly, and he bypassed him to go in with Teofimo at this point. So I don't want to hear with Josh Taylor this or that. His legacy is going to be remembered in large part on the Jack Hadrill fight.
If he takes Lopez apart, Jack, he'll resurrect it. He'll say I had a tough time making the weight. It was a one-off. Let me fight him again, or I'm going to go up to 147. But Jack, my point is this: I don't think Taylor is a player at 147. At 140, I would still probably take him over everybody except Prograis. But at 147. I think maybe there's 5 guys that would take him apart.
147. I mean, Bud Crawford.
That's too fast of a track for him, as good as he is.
You hear that Bud Crawford and Errol Spence have been talking on the phone. I think they're friends.
But we don't see anything.
I think they're friends. They're like talking a lot. They're like homies or whatever. I'm being sarcastic now.
I got you. Jack, think about this. If that fight was made, do you know how difficult that fight would be to handicap? Because we've seen so little of both of them. Who can honestly say what they have now?
I don't know what Terence Crawford has now. I might actually pick
I said both of them.
Now. Yeah, but Terence Crawford's like 36, and he didn't look that great to me in his last fight. I mean, he was getting hit more than usual. So if you're going to attribute his last fight, well, he was a bit rusty. What's he going to be now?
No, I understand that. But Spence has been out even longer. So that would be such a hard fight to handicap. All we could do is go back and go off of what we remember of both of them, because I can't say how good Terence Crawford is. I can just say this much. I miss him more than any other fighter in the game. I miss watching Terence Crawford. I can't remember the last time someone came along who I enjoyed watching so much. I mean, I can't even think, Jack. It's been that long. I mean, maybe Curry, maybe Leonard. I mean, that's how much I think of Crawford.
Okay.
And I agree, Joe, that's true. Most people watch from the lose.
You wanted to give recognition to one of the all-time greats who had a recent birthday, even though he's deceased. Why don't you tell us about him? Not that everyone knows about him, but pay tribute to him.
Joe Louis, the Brown Bomber. Jack, I am a huge Joe Louis fan, and I can make a case that he is the greatest boxer and puncher in heavyweight history. Not the hardest puncher, but if you take in totality his accuracy, the way he could put them together with both hands, the short space he needed to get off, and I think fundamentally he's the best boxer. Is he flashy like Ali or Holmes or move around and use the ring like Tunney? No, but he's so efficient, and that's what boxing is. I think he's the best overall and most complete heavyweight before or since. And if I had to rate my all-time greatest heavyweights, I go back and forth between Muhammad Ali and Joe Louis. I actually think Louis was the better fighter, but I think Ali's toughness, size, speed, and style would be the difference maker in a head-to-head fight. But I don't think it would be as easy as people think.
Let me play devil's advocate. And I am playing devil's advocate because I think the world of Joe Louis, one of the greatest of all time. People said he was a sucker for right hand. People said he didn't have the greatest chin. How do you answer that?
Jack, he was stopped by Schmeling when he trained on the golf course, and he ate 50 right hands in that fight before he went. And then he was knocked out by the Brockton Blockbuster when he was 37 years old, and Marciano had to hit him for 7 rounds before he broke him. I know he was down 10 times, but they were mostly flash knockdowns. He was never close to being stopped. Walcott could punch. I know Braddock caught him with a shot, but I mean, does he have the greatest chin in history in the heavyweight division? Does he have a Foreman chin or an Ali chin? No, but his chin was good enough. And as far as the right hand goes, you know what, Jack? Because he came in and he was on you with that subtle pressure, and he was a little bit upright, even though he had a nice tight defense. I mean, you can make a case he's a little bit upright for a right hand, but don't miss because he's going to counter you and knock your teeth out.
Frank, there's a recent movie that just came out. It didn't get the greatest reviews, according to a mutual friend, Ben Dowdy. He thought it was terrible. You saw the movie. I haven't seen it. Obviously, I know what it's about. Everyone knows what it's about. But Big George Foreman, the movie, you saw it, right? Give us your star rating. Terzo star rating.
Jack, if you're a boxing aficionado like us or Ben, you're going to have issues with the movie. But at the end of the day, it's a rags to riches to almost rags to super riches story. It's a good feel-good story. And look, if you're not a boxing fan, it gives you a capsule of George's career. Of course, there are things wrong, but I don't think it was terrible. I mean, I had to see it because I'm a huge Foreman fan. I actually enjoyed it more than I did the movie on Ali, although the movie Ali was based in only 10 years of Ali's life. But look, would I recommend it and say you have to see it? No, I'd say wait till it streams. But I liked it a little bit more than Ben. I thought it was a good feel-good story. And it tells you about Foreman's religion, his faith, which came through his mother. It gives you a little bit, it takes you back into what a killer he was at a young age and how he made, Jack, people never talk about this, but do you know how amazing it is for George Foreman to only have about 20 fights as an amateur and be the world champion and go to the Olympics as a 19-year-old and beat the Russians and the Germans and win a gold medal? And I think he had 4 fights, and I think he won 3 of them, but stopped by stoppage. And the Russian he beat, Chapolis, was 29 years old. Foreman was 19.
Frank, it shows you how fickle this society is in the United States. When Foreman turned pro on the undercard of the Joe Frazier, Jerry Quarry first fight on June 23rd, 1969, this is coming off him waving the American flag. They're booing him at the Garden, booing him. It just shows you how fickle we are as a society that way.
But Jack, remember what was going on in '69, and that was after Carlos and Smith. So Foreman, and the movie does touch on the flack he took because he did wave the flag.
One movie we haven't seen, Frank, I can't figure this out for the life of me. The One Famous Fighter. The best ever, Sugar Ray Robinson, the most flamboyant, the coolest. How could there not be a movie on this guy? How? I don't
get there's been documentaries, Jack, but not a movie.
I don't care the documentary. That can do a documentary on you and I doing this show. And I'm not talking about documentary. I'm talking about movie.
Right.
You know, I mean, him owning, a block in Harlem, all the businessmen, his entourage, his flamboyance in the ring. How on earth can there not be a movie? There are movies out on Chuck Wepner, Mickey Ward, Vinny Paz. I don't get this. I think for a movie to be successful, Frank, it still has to have a great conclusion. A lot of times conclusions are exaggerated. In the case of the movie on Mickey Ward, The Fighter, they have Mickey Ward winning a so-called world title against Shane Nary. Shane Nary wasn't a real heavyweight champion. He held a minor sanctioning body belt. So they made it out like Mickey Ward won the world title. He's world champion. They're exaggerating.
Right. Yeah, they pull the Hollywood stuff, right.
The same with Vinny
See, with Foreman, they didn't have to do that.
Yeah, with Vinny Paz, the way they ended it. But listen,
I never saw the Vinny Paz move.
Vinny's was an inspirational story, with the injury, with the neck, how he came back. It was an enjoyable movie.
It's funny, Jack, you mentioned Foreman, and we mentioned Lewis, and we touched on Ali a little bit. They're my top 3 all time. Ali, Lewis, and Foreman.
I think virtually everyone, I shouldn't say virtually, the majority of the people rate Ali Lewis 1-2 for the most part.
Right.
That's the consensus, even though you'll have some people who might go for Marciano, Dempsey, or whatever.
I have Foreman 3rd. I have Larry Holmes 4th. And I go back and forth between Sonny Liston and Lennox Lewis for 5th.
Yeah, well, it depends what your criteria is. Based on accomplishment, you got to put Lennox Lewis ahead. Lennox Lewis arguably could be the number 3 based on accomplishment, strictly.
Jack, I'll leave the viewers with this. If you think about this, nobody argues against Ali having fought the best opposition of any heavyweight ever.
Yep.
Lennox Lewis and Evander Holyfield are in that next rung as far as their opposition. You look at their opposition, unbelievable.
Yeah.
And they fought a lot of punchers too.
Definitely. Okay, Frank, until next week, at least Haney Loma, I can't be proven wrong, and you're right. We'd both be proven wrong, but who's going to be more wrong? I mean, that would be the question. Who's going to be more right? We'll see next. We'll talk about it next week.
All right, Jack. Thanks for watching, everybody. And we'll see you next week.